High-stakes summit. We're at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where President Trump talks North Korea and tariffs with Japan's prime minister. Update on Syria. Lawmakers and military officials debate what to do following the U.S.-led missile strikes. A post-Castro Cuba. What's next for the majority Catholic country as they prepare for a new president? And enough with the fake news. Experts in church communications gather in Rome to explore social media and free speech. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 17th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump says North and South Korea have his blessing to discuss ending the decades-long war between the two countries. President Donald Trump made the remarks at a high-stakes summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The two have forged a friendship, but tension is mounting over differences of handling North Korea and on trade. Tonight, the leaders are meeting at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in West Palm Beach, Florida. And that is where we find White House correspondent Mark Irons, who is traveling with the president. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president has met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. More than any other world leader, the White House is expecting a very positive summit here over the next couple of days. But Prime Minister Abe is showing some concern with the president's plan to sit down with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And President Trump is saying that when it comes to trade, Japan is not playing fair.
Great guy, friend of mine.
The president tweets, "I'm in Florida and looking forward to my meeting with Prime Minister Abe of Japan, working on trade and military security." The leaders will discuss the president's upcoming meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, something of concern to Prime Minister Abe. He worries President Trump will allow North Korea to keep its short-range missiles, which are still capable of reaching Japan. Abe says, "I hope to confirm that we will continue to give the maximum level of pressure so that North Korea abandons its nuclear program in a fully verifiable and irreversible manner." Another key issue on the table, trade. The U.S. has a $68.8 billion trade deficit with Japan. Trump has exempted many U.S. allies from newly imposed tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, but not Japan. And the president fulfilled a campaign promise to cancel the Trans-Pacific Partnership, although last week, Trump said he'd be open to renegotiating the trade deal. The president tweeted, "Would only join TPP if the deal was substantially better than the deal offered to President Obama. We already have bilateral deals with 6 of the 11 nations in TPP and are working to make a deal with the biggest of those nations, Japan, who has hit us hard on trade for years." Today, the White House chief economic advisor Larry Kudlow says the administration would like to reach a free trade agreement with Japan at some point, but he's also downplaying the idea of the U.S. re-entering TPP, saying at this point it's more of a thought than a policy. Lauren?
Mark, there's a lot at stake as President Trump prepares to meet with Kim Jong-un. How is Japan's Prime Minister Abe trying to add his voice to the conversation?
Well, President Trump and Shinzo Abe have reportedly been in constant communication since the president agreed to sit down with Kim Jong-un. In addition to wanting the North Koreans to end their nuclear weapons program, Abe is calling for the release of Japanese abductees. The U.S. is also pushing for the release of Americans in North Korea. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons traveling with the president in West Palm Beach, Florida. Officials in Saudi Arabia say they are in talks with the Trump administration about sending their military into Syria. Reports indicate President Trump wants to assemble an Arab force to replace American troops stationed in the war-torn country. It's been 10 days since alleged chemical attacks killed dozens in southern Syria. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the Pentagon.
Syrians are celebrating the anniversary of their independence from the French. Shouting pro-Syrian slogans, they carry flags and photos of President Assad. Syria's state news agency claims UN-backed inspectors have been allowed into the Damascus suburb of Douma. It's the site of a suspected gas attack on April 7th, where 40 people died. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stopped short of confirming the news. He calls on the Syrian government to ensure the inspectors are able to work without restrictions.
We consider that it is very important that whatever has happened is followed by an impartial, independent, and effective investigation.
The Russian military says it did find chemical weapons, but in a rebel laboratory, not a government one. Syrian activists still blame the Assad regime for the attack. It prompted the U.S., Britain, and France to launch a weekend strike on Syrian research facilities. Russian officials say the alleged attack in Syria was a fabrication staged by British intelligence agencies to pave the way for Allied strikes. The U.S. and its allies dispute that, saying the airstrikes were justified.
I'll begin in Syria and then move to Iraq.
Army Colonel Ryan Dillon, a coalition spokesperson talking to the press from Baghdad, says U.S. forces in Syria have not seen any uptick in violence since the airstrikes. I asked him about Assad and Russia's other ally, Iran.
How often do coalition forces or SDF forces engage with Iranian-backed troops?
I know that we, as the coalition, do not at all.
That was correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the Pentagon, and he says that the U.S. and its allies are helping the Iraqis fight small militant groups backed by Iran, and the State Department calls Iran the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. In Syria, the Catholic Chaldean Archbishop of Aleppo says it is a strong show of force, but does little to help the Syrian people. Behind closed doors, America's top military leaders brief lawmakers about Syria, reviving a broader debate on whether Congress needs to approve military action. Let's go to Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. A bipartisan group of senators is proposing a new resolution to authorize the use of military force. That's known around here as an AUMF. But it would only apply to non-state terrorist groups. The war against ISIS is being fought with powers granted after 9/11. Now Congress is once again taking up the debate. The bipartisan resolution would not authorize strikes against countries like this weekend's blitz against Syria. But the bill would repeal the post-9/11 war powers, replacing it with new powers to go after specific terrorist groups.
This is about ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban, or about non-state organizations that are co-belligerents with them and taking hostile action against the United States or coalition partners.
Republican co-sponsor Jeff Flake tells me it's needed.
We've needed this for a number of reasons. One, Congress has kind of shirked its responsibility in this regard. But two, the administration needs Congress to have skin in the game. And this will definitely give us a chance to weigh in.
The bill would require Congress to review the authorization every 4 years. Not all lawmakers are convinced. Republican critic Rand Paul says it leads the U.S. down a dangerous path.
Yeah, you could pass an authorization specifically for one targeted group. You could do it for a shorter period of time. The problem is if you have no time constraint and no geographic constraint, basically you're committing us to worldwide war forever. So basically I see this new AUMF as a rubber stamp for perpetual war, and I think that's a big mistake.
The Senate Foreign Relations Committee next week will consider this war powers bill, but Speaker Ryan dismissed the new proposal and would not commit to a vote in the House. Republican Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska tells me, despite Ryan's objections, he thinks it's the right thing to do. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Joining me now is Congressman Bradley Byrne, a Republican from Alabama and a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you.
Congress's role in authorizing the use of military force has been a hot topic for decades. Should the president have come to Congress before Friday's military strikes in Syria?
No, he did not have that obligation. Now, let me make this very clear. I've been saying for years that we need a new authorization for the use of military force for what we're doing in the Middle East. But that particular strike falls within his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution. So I think he had plenty of authority to do it, and he did not need congressional approval before he did it.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi would disagree with you. She issued a statement saying one night of airstrikes is not a substitute for a clear, comprehensive, serious strategy. The president must come to Congress and secure an authorization for use of military force by proposing that comprehensive strategy. Your thoughts?
Well, I think we do need a comprehensive strategy, but I don't think he had to come to the Congress before he made that particular strike. Now, if you talk about the greater effort there in Syria and outside of Syria, yes, I think we need a strategy there. But we've got to resolve, and this is for all of us, Congress and the President, we've got to resolve what we want to do there. Do we want to be there on a permanent basis? If so, what are we trying to accomplish there? Now, I've been concerned from the very beginning that we didn't have a clear Syria policy going back to President Obama. And we need to make up our minds. Do we want to be there on a permanent basis to try to advocate for a new government there? Or do we want to have a much more limited role? I personally believe we should have a more limited role, and I think that's where the president is.
And I think it is, too. He talked about pulling out those 2,000 troops who are remaining. Yesterday, I talked to Claire Lopez, the Center for Security Policy. She told me that the Trump administration is making very clear the purpose of these strikes is not to intervene in the civil war, yet hundreds of thousands of people have died in the past 7 years, and we're pulling out those remaining troops. Are we just giving up on them?
No, I think we're taking a very realistic view of what we can accomplish there. You know, there's some places where even with all of our military power, we cannot accomplish the policy end or the interest of the United States. What is the interest of the United States in Syria? I mean, it's hard to find what our interest is there beyond, in a very general sense, making sure that we uphold that this general international rule that we will not tolerate anybody in the world using chemical weapons on other people. So the strike Friday night was as much a message to Iran and to Russia as it was a strike against Syria itself.
Let's talk about Syrian refugees for a minute. In 2015, you asked then President Obama to stop the Syrian refugee program due to security concerns. What's your feeling now?
I have the same concerns. Here's the problem. Syria is a failed state. So our ability to vet anybody coming from that part of the world is very low. We just don't know who these people are. They can tell us that they're this person from this village, but we have no way of knowing if they're that person or if they're a terrorist fighter that's been embedded in the refugee program. The people of Syria, even the refugees, are far better if we can take care of them there than try to bring them over here. So I hope that we will pursue that sort of a program and help the Syrian refugees over there and not spend the considerable resources to bring a much smaller number of them over here.
Congressman Bradley Byrne, Republican from Alabama, member of the House Armed Services Committee, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Vice President Mike Pence announces $16 million in aid for Venezuelans fleeing their country.
We're with you to see freedom once again prosper and thrive and to end the humanitarian crisis that is Venezuela.
Pence made the announcement at the Summit of the Americas in Peru as a Venezuelan Catholic charity warns of the death of thousands of children due to malnutrition. The U.S. aid will provide migrants with safe drinking water, shelter, and work opportunities. More than 1 million refugees have fled Venezuela in the past 2 years due to the economic and political crisis. For more information on this story, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Cuba prepares for the end of an era. Raul Castro will step down Thursday as the country's president. A successor will be named next week. The new president of the communist nation faces several problems, including a stagnant economy and decaying infrastructure. The country is 85% Catholic, although the government is officially atheist. Pope Francis visited there in 2015. Myanmar's new president grants amnesty to at least 8,500 prisoners, including 2 Christian pastors. They were arrested after helping journalists report on a Catholic church that was destroyed in an airstrike. The amnesty coincides with the country's New Year's celebrations. Philippines Bureau of Immigration has ordered the release of a 71-year-old nun. She was detained for illegal political activities. Local media report she was critical of President Duterte. The country's Catholic bishops say 71-year-old Sister Patricia Fox is a missionary and has worked in the Philippines for 27 years. Fox is expected to be released today. Lawyers for Cardinal George Pell want the charges of sex abuse he faces to be thrown out. His hearing ended today in Australia. The judge will decide on May 1st if there will be a trial. Cardinal Pell, the Vatican's chief finance minister, denies the accusations. Coming up, we have reaction to the high-level Japan-U.S. summit at Mar-a-Lago. And Prophet Seeker. Pope Francis has a request for the faithful. A pop-up exhibit outside the White House is bringing awareness to the opioid crisis. Prescribed to Death features more than 20,000 engraved faces on pills, one for each of the people who died in 2015 from opioid addiction. It's on display until tomorrow at the Ellipse near the White House. President Trump and his allies face new challenges about the FBI raid of the office of Michael Cohen. That's the president's personal attorney. In court yesterday, Cohen revealed another of his clients. That was Fox News host Sean Hannity. The network today says Hannity continues to have our full support. Joining me now is Larry O'Connor, Washington Times columnist and host of The Larry O'Connor Show on WMAL.
I need to use you for my opening now. That's good.
That's right. Michael Cohen, president's attorney, provided counsel, apparently, to Fox News host Sean Hannity. It blew up yesterday on all cable news. The question being, should he have disclosed his relationship with Michael Cohen?
Yeah, and I think that there's two answers to that question, actually. Should he have, from some sort of legal or ethical journalistic perspective? I think the jury's out on that, honestly, because I don't think anyone really considers Sean Hannity to be a capital J journalist. He is an opinion journalist, I suppose. His job is to give his commentary and his opinion, and I think his audience knows that he already has a perspective.
But they didn't know that
Correct.
he had a direct relationship with Michael Cohen.
And that's where my answer is yes to the other part of the question, which is out of basic respect to his audience, out of respecting your audience enough to know that they're wise enough to be able to ingest all this information and then take your opinion and your analysis and your commentary within that perspective. But here's the important thing. As you well know in this town, with journalists and politicians and elected officials, it's incestuous. I mean, how far do we take that standard? Two stories that drove everyone crazy yesterday. Hannity should have disclosed his relationship with Cohen. And the other story they were crazy about was James Comey's interview with George Stephanopoulos. One of the things George Stephanopoulos asked Comey about was his investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. Well, did George Stephanopoulos disclose that he used to be the senior White House advisor to President Bill Clinton, that he continued to be a major donor to the Clinton Foundation? He didn't disclose those things.
You're saying there's a double standard.
There is a huge double standard here. Now, again, don't get me wrong. If I were Sean Hannity, I've commented. I knew Steve Bannon. I worked with Steve Bannon. Whenever I commented on Steve Bannon or analyzed things, I always threw out to my audience, by the way, I used to work with the guy. I know him. So my audience knows. So they understand and they can contextualize.
What's the expiration date for Stephanopoulos?
Well, as far as I know, he was still donating to the Clinton Foundation up until 2 years ago. So I don't think there is an expiration date, frankly, as long as Hillary and Bill and the Clinton family are still in the news. But it goes even further than that. Ben Rhodes was the Deputy National Security Advisor to Barack Obama. His brother, David Rhodes, is the president of CBS News. Does everyone on CBS News have to disclose that before they start talking about Obama's national security?
I think that's a stretch. It was his brother. But it is a fascinating point, especially for audiences who are looking at news organizations trying to figure out what's real and what's not.
I would like news organizations to start hiring broadcasters because they're really good journalists instead of their connections they have to politicians. If they start avoiding that part of it, because that seems to be what they're doing, then they'll actually get people that don't have those connections.
It's all about the big get in journalism.
That's right.
If you have a connection to a politician, you can get that politician on the show. Larry O'Connor, Washington Times columnist, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
The Supreme Court issues the Trump administration a defeat. It says a federal law making it easier to deport immigrants convicted of crimes is too vague. The justices rule 5-4, with Neil Gorsuch voting with the 4 liberal judges. The Supreme Court won't hear an appeal from a pro-life pastor who challenged Maine's noise limit. It was used to restrict Reverend Andrew March's protest outside a Planned Parenthood clinic in Portland. March says the law targets pro-life advocates. The justices offered no comment yesterday when they rejected the appeal. Pennsylvania's House of Representatives votes to ban abortions when the sole reason is that the baby may have Down syndrome. The Republican majority chamber passed the measure by nearly 3-to-1 margin. But the bill's fate is unclear. The state's Democratic governor opposes it. Up next, our chairman and CEO talks about the dangers of fake news.
La Chiesa ha bisogno dei profeti.
Pope Francis says the church needs prophets. At his daily mass in the Vatican, the Holy Father says a true prophet is not afraid of telling the truth, but also can give people hope, and anyone can do that. Experts in the church communication area are gathering in Rome this week to explore dialogue and respect in the public arena. An American professor taking part says social media platforms are not neutral and therefore pose a serious challenge to freedom of expression.
The values that religious communities sustain and uphold are substantially different from the values of platform network providers such as Facebook and Google, and that those values cannot be summarized by glib phrases like the marketplace of ideas.
The Pontifical University of the Holy Cross is hosting this conference. Participants are focusing on the dynamics of today's media environment and the limitations the church faces as it tries to communicate its message. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from rainy Rome. Juliette, you were at the conference. What's the goal? Why is it important to be debating these issues now?
Well, to quote Pope Francis during World Communications Day 4 years ago, he said we need to resolve our differences through forms of dialogue which help us grow in understanding, and mutual respect and a culture of encounter demands that we be ready not only to give but also to receive, and media can help us greatly in this. So today, more than ever, so-called fake news and post-truth are dominating public debate, and in some countries, increasingly, they're trying to restrict freedom of expression. And in some nations, the Christian message itself has been subject to limitations. Now, whether subtle censorship or open persecution, and it is time that we confronted these issues within a Catholic context. So the goal here is for communications officers working for religious organs to come away holding firm the values of free expression in the public sphere, and with the knowledge that it must transcend the threat of manipulation. And as we know, ecclesiastical communications officers, they have the task of serving society by contributing to the free flow of information.
Even the Pope mentioned fake news in his latest apostolic exhortation. Our CEO and chairman, Michael Warsaw, is among the speakers. Have you talked to him about what his message is going to be?
Indeed, Lauren. So Michael Warsaw is tackling the topic of religious information in a fake news society. And the key learning he wants participants to go away with when they leave Rome is a very, very straightforward one. And it's this: goodness, truth, and beauty will always triumph over fake news. If we focus on the essence of the gospel, then nothing can overturn it, even in the digital era. And that is something that we all need to hold strong in our hearts, isn't it?
Live truth, live Catholic. That happens to be EWTN's motto. Tell us about the university hosting this conference.
So the Pontifical Holy Cross University, back in 1996, established the School of Church Communications, and it was created to prepare communications professors for ecclesiastical professionals for ecclesiastical institutions. And they are the organizers of this event, and the university was the idea of Saint José María Escrivá, the founder of Opus Dei, and it was co-founded by Saint John Paul II and Blessed Álvaro del Portillo, the university's first chancellor.
Okay, Juliette Lindley, stay dry in a rainy Rome. EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, and say hello to Elena Isela, your new producer, coming from our bureau here. We miss her.
Absolutely, I will, Lauren. It's great to have her. Thank you.
A new study about knowledge and awareness in the United States of the Holocaust finds significant lack of knowledge, especially among millennials. Look at this. The study by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany finds 22% of millennials say they have not heard of the Holocaust. 2/3 say they don't know what Auschwitz was. Overall, the study finds 70% believe people are less interested in the Holocaust than they used to be. 6 million Jews were killed in Nazi Germany during World War II. And finally tonight, a Catholic college in Pennsylvania gives the faithful a chance to showcase their original religious works of art. Previous winners of the St. Vincent College's Catholic Arts Competition include St. Michael by Dave and Suzanne Mirello, The Good Samaritan by Christopher Ruane, and Our Beloved Dominican Saints by Bernadette Karstensen. The competition was founded in 2001 by a Benedictine monk. It seeks to foster the arts in a Christian tradition. The contest is accepting submissions until August. You can check online, and winners will be announced in October. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.